Andrew Ryan is not a visionary, he was a dealer in despair. The magician's final act vanishing into a sea of blood did not mask madness. It exposed Rapture's rot, plasmids sold as salvation, vigors traded as weaponry, human pain packaged for the elite. He was a dealer in despair. Madness exposed Rapture's rot. What illusion remains when the curtain falls? Lamb's hymns chain. What illusion remains when the curtain falls? Mirror, chains both reflecting a human bound by the city pain built on the same lie backs of the packaged for the broken elite. What did he truly vanish? The dream. The debt, the devil's contract, signed in salt and blood. The magician's final illusion did not mock death, but the living. Each vanish mirrored the elite's erasure of the working class sculpted into the void, forgotten. His final act. A mirror held to Rapture's rot. The more he disappeared, the clearer the truth. The elite's power was a trick, a borrowed breath. A lie sustained by the gasping of the many. Was Houdini's madness a mask for clarity? Was performance as Houdini's madness a mask for threaded a needle between clarity, critique, and collapse, exposing how Rapture's architects built their utopia on the backs of broken splicers? The magician did not lose himself. He laid bare the contract, clause by vanishing clause. The illusion was never Hissner, was the madness. It belonged to the city. The cold in the theater's rafters clung like a second skin. Flickering neon etched his silhouette. Blue light pooled around the magician's empty chair, the scent of ozone sharp in the humid air. Below, the crowd murmured, their breath visible in the crush of bodies. He had rehearsed this, the snap of a wrist, the twist of a coin into nothingness. But tonight the coin was a gene, slipped from a pocket sewn into his coat. The gasp when it vanished wasn't for the trick. It was for what it meant. Andrew Ryan's utopia had built its spires on a basement of suffering. Plasmids harvested from derelicts, vigors distilled from the broken, each transaction a hymn to objectivism's hollow altar. The magician's fingers traced the contract head made them sign, the fine print bleeding into his palms. When he stepped through the mirror, it wasn't escape. It was a mirror to the city itself, a body that consumed its own. Ryan's lie was a currency. Booker DeWitt's debt, Tenenbaum's stolen children, all tokens in a game where survival was the only moral high ground. The magician watched the elite lean closer, their greed blinding them to the trap. He knew the price of defiance. His final vanish wasn't an act. It was a ledger open for all to see. The curtain fell, the applause was a thunderstorm, but in the dark the city kept its accounting. The clapping hands of Rapture's elite faded into a fevered ovation. Marble halls gleamed, chandeliers swallowed shadows. For 4 years the city's heart beat with hollow triumph. At the heart of this gilded festival the magician returned weakly. His act, a woman in a velvet shroud, bound in chains, lowered into a steel vault. The crowd held its breath, a flick of his wrist, a cloud of silver dust. She vanished. The vault opened, empty, the crowd roared. But in the vault's belly another act played, a little sister, small hands prying open a canister, a glow, a gasp, a stolen breath. The girl rose, translucent, as if her body were a trick of the light, the illusionist's masterpiece, or his indictment. Rapture's leaders called it entertainment. The poor called it alchemy, a trade. The rich drank their champagne, blind to the price of that shimmer. For every vanished woman a little sister's soul was bottled, every gasp of wonder a ledger entry. The magician's face never wavered, eyes like shattered glass. A smile that did not reach the throat. He did not need to scream. The vault spoke for him. The vault where the powerful turned the girl child into currency. The vault where the city's sins became spectacle. What did they fear more, the vanishing act or the truth it exposed? The elite never asked. Their glasses stayed full. Their ledgers stayed clean. The little sisters did the math. The applause grew louder, the vaults deeper, and the illusion, it never collapsed, it only thickened. A curtain drawn over the city's beating wound. Rapture's golden age was not a miracle, it was a magician's trick. The trick making a society disappear, one stolen breath at a time. The magician's final act did not vanish, it lingered, a thread pulled loose from Rapture's gilded fabric, unraveling what Andrew Ryan called order. Each performance a silent accusation, the elite's breath was stolen by their own laws. The magician's empty chair, his vanished assistants, specters of the little sisters, the laborers, the ones who built the towers only to drown in their shadows. When Atlas hurled his defiance in 1958, the rebellion was not a rupture. It was the scream beneath the music. Fontaine's men in their tailored suits, clutching shotguns, Atlas followers, spliced and scarred, wielding the very chemicals that had bound them to servitude. The magician watched. Or perhaps he witnessed his final act, performed in the grand auditorium days before the siege. What did it show? A man stepping into thin air, not as a fool's escape, but as a prophet's truth. The city's illusion was already gone. They called him mad. A splicer reduced to pantomime, but his trick was clearer than any bullet. The elite's world had always been a stage set, propped on stolen labor and silent deaths. When Fontaine's enforcers stormed the auditorium, they found no ghost. Only a ring of empty chairs arranged in a circle, a throne room without a king. The war that followed was not a climax, it was an epilogue. Atlas Revolution, Fontaine's final stand, both were just the curtain call. The magician's vanishing act had already revealed the void beneath Rapture's marble. A void filled with the wail of the forgotten. What remains, dear listener, is the question no splicer could answer. When the illusion shattered, did the city die? Or did it simply become what it always was, invisible, a phantom built on the backs of the nameless? The magician's last trick was not to disappear. It was to make the world see itself, and in that seeing, Rapture drowned. The magician's final illusion was etched in salt and shattered glass. Flickering atom lanterns bathed the theater in feverish light, the crowd's breath hanging misted in the cold. Gasps rippled as mirrors reflected not escape, but judgment, each patron's hollow eyes staring back. A final card vanished from the suit of a trembling tycoon. His pocket echoed with the splash of stolen hope. He knew the price of truth in glass. The curtain fell, no applause came, only the hiss of rising tides swallowing Rapture's reflection. The tides had always demanded a price. In Rapture's shadowed theaters, Houdini's act was no trick. It was a ledger of debts, each performance a tally of the little sisters' stolen breaths. They were not children but currency, their laughter drowned in the clink of atom gold. The magician's final illusion, a mirror held to the city's rot. He vanished not into wonder but into the hollow where Rapture's conscience had been buried. The elite watched, smug in their velvet, as the curtain swallowed him whole. They knew his ropes were not escapism but a sly finger aimed at their gilded throats. Every reenactment, a requiem for the exploited. Every disappearance, a rebuke of their utopia. The sisters' wails echoed in the rigging, unseen, unspoken, unsaved. On his last night the machinery failed. No smoke, no sleight of hand, just a man gasping as the trapdoor yawned. He fell not to applause but to silence. The truth head-coded in trickery could no longer be masked. Rapture's class divide was no secret, it was sacred law. The little sisters remained. Their trafficking never ceased. Houdini's body was found bloated in the theater's depths. A note clutched his hand, a child's drawing crayoned with atom red. Who taught them to bleed? Who taught them to die? The curtain closed. The city's hypocrisy stood revealed, but the tides do not forgive. And the cost was never his to pay. The magician's stage was no escape, it was a mirror. The elite who scoffed at his act saw only illusion. They did not see the curtain between classes, the line drawn in blood, each performance a rebuke, each vanish a theft. The little sisters moved like phantoms through Rapture's underbelly, their glow a taunt to the hollow men who built this city. They were not damsels, they were currency. Their suffering was not a tragedy, it was infrastructure. Houdini's trick so crude, so obvious, hid no secrets. A girl bound, a box sealed, a gasp as she dissolved into the dark. The audience clapped. They did not hear the screams beneath the applause. They did not count the cost. The magician's hands, so dexterous in trickery, were blunt instruments of truth. His act was no sideshow, it was a ledger. A transaction, a girl taken, atom extracted, a body discarded. The elite laughed. They had not yet learned their own fate. The contrast was knife-edged. The little sisters had no choice. The magician's victim at least played a role. She was made to vanish willingly, a performance, a contract. The girls had no contract, no performance, only the cold, clinical swipe of a harvester's blade, only the hollow-eyed return to the sea their light snuffed. The magician's final act was the purest lie. He made a woman disappear. The city made millions watch. Did the elite feel the weight of the box? The panic of the gasp? No, they traded in abstractions, souls for profit, hearts for power. The magician's illusion was a window into their hypocrisy, a mirror. A warning, but warnings are only warnings until they are not, until the illusion becomes reality. until the box is opened and the girl is gone. The magician's final disappearance was no trick. He became his own metaphor, a man erased by the system he exposed. The curtain fell, the city's hunger remained. The tides waited, and in the dark the little sisters drifted alive, or not beyond the reach of those who built their empire on the backs of the vanishing. The magician's final act was no desperate trick. The curtain rose on empty air. A man in a tuxedo stood alone beneath Rapture's dying light, his hands tracing patterns in the gloom. What did he vanish into but the same void that swallowed the city whole? The elite watched, their faces carved from salt and arrogance. They laughed as he reappeared, always reappeared until he did not, each return a mockery of their promises, each disappearance a ledger of unpaid debts. The lighthouse loomed, not as salvation, but as a mirror. It reflected the faces of those who drained the ocean dry, who built thrones on the breath of the drowned. No illusion here, only arithmetic. The magician's final disappearance was an equation solved. Power plus greed accountability equals 0. The little sisters whispered it in their language of broken glass. The splicers sang it in their hymns of torn flesh, and the lighthouse, ever patient, waited, not for redemption, for resolution. When the curtain fell, Rapture's architects found themselves on stage. The final trick, the audience had long since become the act. The magician's curtain call was no trick. A splicer in tattered velvet, he carved his descent into Rapture's bones. Each vanish, each reappear threads of a tapestry only the dying could read. What did he show when the elite watched, enthralled? A city built on Ayn Rand's sea rotted from the foundation up. The little sisters, trapped in their gilded tanks, were the final act. Their blood not gold, but the price paid in silence. Andrew Ryan's creed chiseled might into law, yet his utopia needed victims to justify its vision. The magician knew this, his props not just rags and mirrors but accusations. A splicer's mind, fractured by the very systems he cursed, became the purest lens. When he vanished, it was not into madness, it was into truth. Tenenbaum's experiments, Suchong's deals, Fontaine's lies, all performances in the same grotesque play. The little sisters, Rapture's most hunted, were its most sacred, their harvest a sacrament to the god of self, the magician's final illusion. To make the powerful see their own faces in the splicer's hollow eyes, what remains when the curtain falls, not a lesson but a mirror. Rapture's architects, so certain of their divinity, found their legacy written in the slime of the depths. The final trick, you cannot cheat the tide. And the sea always remembers who it drowns. The magician's final trick was no illusion. His hands, gnarled by salt and slime, traced circles in the rotting velvet of Rapture's underbelly. They say he vanished not to escape, but to expose the way the city's architects vanished behind their glass towers, leaving the splicers to choke on promises. A finger snap, a cloud of phosphorescent algae, the same force that turned men into monsters had etched its own epitaph in their madness. Would you kindly? The phrase lingers, a ghost in the static of drowned phonographs. It was never about the splicer's pleas or the little sister's blood. The words were a key, rusted but intact, meant to turn in the lock of those who built their utopia on a lie. You were always the star of the act, you were always the punchline. The elite carved their cathedral of hubris, blind to the stage hands in the wings, splicers whispering truths in the language of gasps and gurgles. Houdini's recurring performance. A mirror held up to the abyss, each re-emergence a rebuke. Look closer. The city's heart was never innovation, never art. It was a puppet string, taut and trembling, pulling every hand, every choice, into a dance of empty applause. Dread blooms in the knowledge that the final curtain was scripted from the first dig of the drill. The magician's act was not madness, it was a requiem. And Rapture, it was the joke. The magician's final act was no accident. Each performance threaded a needle between Rapture's rot and Sophia's rigid collectivism. A splicer's hands shaped the illusion, but the message came from the surface. Why did crowds cheer as he vanished? The answer gnaws at the lie of equality. Sophia's utopia was a vault, but Rapture's class war was the trick. The final curtain call,